Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Attention Engineer. I'm Laura Kidd, producer, songwriter and solo artist making music as Penfriend. Find me around the internet at Penfriend Rocks and say hi. In this noisy world, the gift of someone's attention is priceless. I'm here to have the conversations I've always hoped for with some of the artists I admire the most, so thank you for joining me on my quest. I love learning more about the creativity, grit and blagging required to keep a career in the arts going, so I promise to keep asking my unusual questions and trying to have great conversations with great people. This podcast is supported by Arts Council England and the National Lottery and powered by the Correspondence Club. I'll tell you more about that later on. Greetings, curious listener. I hope this episode finds you well. Since I last spoke to you, I've been busy working on some new songs and playing a super luxe live stream for the Correspondence Club. I've been playing online gigs since 2013 and finally had a chance to overhaul my setup at the start of the year. I had absolutely no idea what was coming our way, of course, but it felt like high time to up my game, and I'm really glad I did. Last Thursday, I played 7 unreleased songs, plus the debut Penfriend single Everything Looks Normal in the Sunshine, and I played around with screens and embedded media and all sorts. I'm already planning more geeky fun for the second Penfriend TV show next month. In the meantime, I've collected the posh recordings of the gig into a live album, which is only available till the end of Sunday, the 5th of July, after which it'll turn into a puff of smoke. So hurry over to penfriendrocks.bandcamp.com to grab it on a pay-what-you-can basis. Thank you. Now to my guest today, comedian Bec Hill. Bec Hill is an Australian-born, UK-based comedian, writer, actor and presenter. She's best known for her viral flip chart videos and ridiculous social media adventures. When she's not performing stand-up around the world to both adults and kids, she's either appearing on or writing for telly, chatting on various podcasts, or winning awards. She's also been a time traveller, the voice of several characters in Mass Effect, Andromeda and Anthem, and most recently became a tooth fairy. I first witnessed Bec's singular talent in 2014 at Edinburgh Fringe. I was up there playing ukulele covers of my favourite 90s songs in a show called I Blame Britpop with my friend Mark Burrows. If you're interested, I played In-Betweener by Sleeper, This Is a Low by Blur, and On by Long Pigs. Of course. After the show one day, Mark invited me to go and see his friend Bec perform, and it was wonderful. So colourful, fun, and very, 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 very funny. I've kept a keen eye out for her ever since, and as it was her tweet that kicked off my big social media break last summer, leading to the angle of this podcast, it felt very right to summon up the courage to ask her to be my first non-musical guest. We had such a frank, honest, and uplifting conversation. I'm so excited to share it with you. Here we go. Well, hello, Bec Hill comedian. How are you?
I'm surprisingly well. I've decided to use this time in isolation to do all the things that I've been putting off, and now I have too many things to do, which is like such a great place to be in, to be honest, but it's exhausting.
Well, all these online courses we're all expected to do, plus constantly webcasting and setting up podcasts.
Yeah, I've spoken more to my family in Australia in the last couple of weeks than I have in like the last couple of years.
Wow.
Not including when I go out to Australia.
Yeah, I was going to say. There's definitely positives that are happening. I feel like, I'm kind of doing this in every conversation, that there's sort of a disclaimer at the beginning of everything I say, which is I realise that in comparison to a global pandemic where people are dying, none of this means anything. But I still want to make my podcast and I want to make my album, and I don't have other things to spend my days doing. So I feel a little bit guilty, but also I know that other people doing art things and being present online and stuff is really helping me get through the day. So I guess you just continue, right?
Well, that's it. I've been making way more little online content, and you just commented earlier before we started recording that about one of the little videos I put up yesterday. And in the past, I always felt guilty putting them up because I felt like they're not proper work. And if people saw me doing that, they would think of me as procrastinating. Whereas right now, the situation that we're in, it's seen as a necessity to like build up an online following and everything. But the other side of that is just the amount of people who have replied to the things I've been putting out, just saying this is exactly what I need right now, or like this is so nice to have just this little moment of, oh, I'm going to think about something else.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's escapism, isn't it? And it's been helping me. I
Mm.
mean, you do a lot of stuff with Robin Ince, don't you? You do
Yeah,
podcast
yeah.
stuff with him. He invited me to go on to his Stay at Home festival on Wednesday, and I went on and performed, and I was terrified because I was doing new stuff. It was, made myself feel really sick. Because then I realised also that gigs are definitely not supposed to be in the morning, and it's for the adrenaline rush reason. Because I just felt dreadful for the rest of the day. I felt awful. I felt like I just wanted to just like have a bar of chocolate and go to sleep, which I would do after a gig.
Yeah.
You know? It was good, but I sort of felt all embarrassed about playing this new song, which is about what's going on now. And then I watched one of the shows that evening and felt like I got so much from it because other people were sharing what they do. And then I kind of had this realization, it's okay to do the stuff that I do because that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a really nice moment of sort of self-reflection, like a forced moment of self-reflection, I think, and of what we do and our purpose at the moment, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And nice.
It is nice. Yeah. And I feel like all of these sort of awful crunch times in history, people have had to just keep going and doing the things they do. And that's how you end up having any society the other side of something like this. It just feels, it can feel really, I mean, for me, it can feel really sort of self-indulgent, but then isn't everything? And there's always something bigger than what I'm doing. So, and that never stopped me before. So I guess I'm just going to keep doing the stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I also find, I don't know if you agree, I feel like after we come out the other side of this, there's going to be a lot of creative types who have become morning people because my body clock has shifted. I keep waking up at 7:30 in the morning.
That's unusual for a comedian.
Which I would never do normally because I'm gigging in the night.
Yeah.
But I've got nothing, as you say, like all my adrenaline is being used up earlier in the day. So by the time I get to about 8 p.m, I'm exhausted.
I was talking to Frank Turner for this podcast last week. It was just before all this really cracked down. So we actually met up and spoke, and it feels like a long time ago now that I could be in a room with a person I didn't know. But it definitely happened. And he was talking about having the 9 o'clock, I think he called it the 9 o'clock shivers. Whenever he wasn't on tour, he'd start feeling like he was supposed to be doing something in the evening, and it would kind of prompt him to sometimes into some bad behavior that he wasn't, he didn't really want to be doing. But that's why, because that, your body's getting prepared for this big thing it had to do.
That's such a good point.
So have you been experiencing that in this time?
Yeah. And it's so early on, before everyone started isolating, I got a really bad case of the flu. Really, really bad. And to the point that early days, everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's coronavirus. Like I went to hospital and had to be quarantined and stuff. But it was just a really bad flu. And it took me out for about 2 weeks of just not being able to function or do anything. And because of that, I stopped drinking. Because normally when I gig, I drink. Even if not like to get on stage, not as like a coping mechanism, it's just afterwards I normally have a pint to sort of settle down and sort of relax a bit so that when I go home I can get to sleep. And because I wasn't gigging and because my immune system, it can't cope with alcohol, I stopped drinking. And now I get to the evenings and I get that 9 o'clock sort of itch. I'm sort of like, oh, what is it? The 9 o'clock shivers?
I think that's what he called it. Yeah.
I've been getting those.
Yeah. And
I've really wanted to drink, but I also know myself well enough to know that if I did that without the element of celebration or anything that goes around it normally, if in a social situation, it could very easily become just a everyday habit that happens.
Yeah.
And I know that I won't come out the other side of this any better. So I'm trying to limit myself.
That's good.
I haven't drunk yet, but I've marked out Sunday. I'm going to allow myself a red wine, and then every Sunday I think I'll treat myself.
I'm really careful about that stuff too. I'd never want anything like that to be a habit. Like I don't drink before I play gigs because I could potentially play badly, and I would be really irritated with myself if it was because I'd had a drink, if I messed it up. And then, just having toured for so many years and seen people develop issues really fast. I never want to have like, oh, I drank 3 days in a row kind of thing. I have to really separate it out so that it's not a habit.
Yeah.
I'm sure in comedy it's a very similar situation, maybe even worse because, correct me if I'm wrong, but comedians are often on their own more than maybe musicians would be.
Yep.
So you're going to have another drink maybe.
Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah, it's very much that. But I was thinking like when you tour, it must be a very similar situation if you're on your own, if you're doing solo stuff.
Yeah, but I've just that's why I tend not to have any alcohol anywhere near me on tour for that reason, because I feel like I've got so much to do, so much to deal with. I've got money on me, I've got gear on me. I'm often in a different country. I might be staying with someone I don't know. It's just good to keep your wits about you, I think. And to be honest, whenever I've got musicians playing with me, they've all been great actually, but when I start working with someone new, I'm always a little worried just to sort of find out if they're really like into booze, because I feel like musicians can tend to celebrate the gig before the gig has gone well.
Yes.
By starting to drink at sound check, for instance, and then you're like, how is it? It's not going to go well now. You've celebrated a little early, you know?
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I'm very similar to you. I don't like to drink before gigs. But that said, I've found that my thing is if I'm emceeing, I'll usually have a drink to start with because, and this is very much a dependent thing and not something that I condone for listeners, but I realize it's because I like to know what I'm talking about. So when I'm doing a set, I might be loose and want to have my wits about me so that I can bounce off of things that happen at the time. But generally, I sort of know what I'm doing and I want to make sure I perform it well. But when I'm emceeing, I find that you need to be way more relaxed when you're emceeing because you want to be more chatty and talk to the people as they talk. And I always found there's a gig that when everything's running on Thursdays in Kentish Town called the Freedom Fridge, and it's a new material night, and it's just a really small intimate venue and usually not a huge amount of audience. But I like it to keep me on my toes. They also do my favorite cider, which is called Thistley Cross, and it's like 7 or 8%.
Ooh.
It's like real, yeah. And so what I tend to do is I have 1 pint in the first half of the show that I make my way through to the interval. And that usually means like I'm not tiddly when I start. By the time I get to interval, I'm kind of like cheery and stuff. The only problem I've found is then in the interval, I tend to have a second pint, which means that at the beginning of the second half, I am amazing. Like I'm really on it. I'm having a lot of fun. You know, everyone's on board. And then by the end of the night, I'm laughing at my own jokes. I'm like just standing up and giggling. And then, you know, and the thing is, it's never to a point, obviously, it's just 2 pints. Like it's it's never to a point that I'm sick, or I especially make sure it never reflects poorly on the people who I'm bringing up.
Yeah.
It's a new material night, so it's unpaid, but at the same time, there's so many newbies on there and I don't want their first experience to be me not doing a good job and giving them an awful introduction. So I always make sure that the audience is at least ready for the next act. But it does mean at the very, very end of the night, after all the acts have been on and stuff, I'll usually just get a bit like, oh, so what are we doing now, everyone?
Off out clubbing, are we?
And usually then what means about 15 minutes later, I'm like, I have to go to bed. It's the only one. It's the only gig though. Like there's no other gigs that I'll allow myself to be that tiddly.
Yeah. It's good to keep it under control.
Yeah. I think as long as I remember to eat beforehand, we're okay.
Please do. Eating's important.
Yeah.
So why comedy? Why do you do that? How did you start doing that?
Ooh, okay. So I don't want to get too heavy into like self-reflection stuff.
It's funny to hear a comedian say that.
Yeah. So
that's so funny.
The light thing is, my family and I used to all watch a lot of stand-up. And so I was really into stand-up when I was growing up. And then when I finished high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I finished high school. And I did all right in school. Like I had pretty good grades. And so it was that sort of like, there's loads of different courses I could do. And I just had no like inkling for any of them. And then I thought I'll take a year off and I'll work and save some money. And then by the end of the year, I'll hopefully have an idea of what I want to study. And I sort of applied for and deferred a bunch of courses so that if I decided I want to do one of them, I could do them. And then during that year off, I entered a stand-up comedy competition just for fun for new people. And and it went really well, and I got bitten by the bug, and then I've basically been chasing it since then. I had to do a lot of day jobs to support my comedy habit for about 8 years, and then finally, and that took me across several different cities and countries, and then how long ago was it now? I think I've been doing this full time for about 7 years now, 6 or 7 years. 7 years, I think, yeah.
Well done. That's hard.
Thank you. Yeah, it took a long time. I think about 3 times I quit my day job and then lasted a couple of months and then had to go back into a new day job. So, and the third time that happened, I knew when it happened that it was going to be the last time because I really liked my day job. It was just customer service gig, but it was for a really great company and they were really supportive to me. And they tried to promote me. And it was at the same time that I was trying to lessen my hours because I was getting more and more gigs. And we had this awkward meeting where they were like, oh, we want to promote you and give you more money. And I was like, ooh, about that. I want to have less responsibility and I don't want to come in as many days a week. And they went, oh, well, that's not a role. We can't do that. And I was like, I have to leave then. And they've been really good there was a company called Moo that make business cards.
Oh, yeah.
But they were great. Yeah, they're really, like, they come across as a fun company online, and it's because they are. They're really, their CEO's great. Like, everyone's really supportive, and they were so cool as well. A lot of them would come to my gigs and everything, and every now and then I'll get a message from one who's like, oh, I saw you doing this. And yeah, it's really nice.
It's really nice. I remember when everyone was going batshit over those cute little cards. I can have a business card with a photo on. Everyone was so excited about it. It was such a thing. And I suppose when Twitter was just starting. Was that about the time that Moo was starting?
Yeah.
It was just such a thing, I remember. Yeah, it's really cute. How did the paper puppetry start?
So I first started doing the paper flip chart stuff about a year into doing stand-up. And what happened was I had an idea for a sketch. I didn't have a sketch act. I didn't have a sketch partner. And I didn't want to bring someone up out of the audience to do the bit. But I thought it was a funny bit at the time. Looking back, it was fine. But at the time, I was like, I've written a thing. And then I was like, oh, I could try and act it out myself, but I can't do accents or voices or anything. So I was like, it's going to be really confusing and it won't be entirely clear what it's meant to be. And I originally drawn the sketch as a 1-frame stick figure cartoon. That's where the idea for the sketch came from. And then I was like, well, I wonder if I draw this cartoon as a really big one onto an A2 pad and then just, have that there as a visual guide, that might work. So I drew it. And I was like, oh, they still have the same voices though. Like if I try, you don't know who's talking. You're just looking at a picture and then I'm standing there talking. So I was like, oh, I'll give them moving mouths and then you'll know which character is talking. So I gave them little moving mouths. And then, and at the end of the sketch, I was like, oh, there's something missing. It's not quite got a punchline, You know when you see those sketches and you're like, just write a punchline. Like don't just play music and go into the next sketch. So I was like, oh, it needs a punchline. So I gave it like one moving element on there that people weren't expecting to move. And that in itself was surprising and enough that people found that funny enough to be like the punchline to the sketch. And then I found that the sketch itself wasn't that funny, but the amount of people who came up and were like, oh, that flip chart thing's really interesting. I've never seen anything like that. And then I started doing more and more like that, and it sort of developed from being this black and white stick figure thing that was super basic to, full 30-page ones that are in color and have LEDs and and streamers and, big 3-dimensional pop-out bits and stuff. So it's been a long time in the making, but it just sort of came about like that. I've always found that I'm a really stubborn person and I don't like taking advice, but I've found that the best thing I've ever done for my career is when I find that the audience keeps saying the same thing over and over again, whether it's that they like the way I do a flip chart or they like misheard lyrics. It took me ages before I realized that I should just do more misheard lyrics. Like I was trying to be all artistic about it and be like, no, I need to constantly keep them on their toes and surprise them with these different things. And I can't do misheard lyrics every time because that'll become way too stagnant and everyone will be expecting something new. And I was like, I can still deliver something that looks new and different, but people like misheard lyrics. It makes them happy. And I've got terrible hearing, so I'm always mishearing lyrics, like constantly. So I just had to get my head out my ass and and just go, right, I'm gonna do more misheard lyrics. And there was a way I used to do whenever I was working on a new show, I would use these post-its to work out what the running order should be, and the audience could choose what the next joke would be. And every time I was workshopping a show that way, people would say, I really like what you do with the post-its. And I was like, oh no, it's actually just part of my creative process. It's not actually the show. And then one year I was like, just do the show like that. Just do the show with post-its. And I was like, oh, it feels like cheating because my set list is up there and I don't have to memorize the order and stuff. And then I realized, like, that doesn't matter. Like, what matters is that people are enjoying it. And I've got to, again, get my head out my ass. Like, it's weird. You start to realize how you have this sort of artistic snobbery. And sometimes you've just got to listen to what the people are enjoying. Because I really enjoy it. I really like making misheard lyric things. And I really like using the Post-its. And I really like making flip charts. And the audience knows. And that's why they enjoy watching it. Anyway, that's my advice. Listen to your audiences.
Well, do the things you like and that they also like, and then you'll both like it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have a similar thing with my stuff. So I was doing my solo thing, the one I just finished, for 10 years. And there's a song where I sing through a megaphone and I walk around in the audience. And there's a song where I got people to sing along. And there's different songs where I use a loop pedal. And those are the three things that people love the most.
Yeah.
And I've definitely been through phases where I was like, I'm not a performing monkey. I shouldn't just do the same thing again and again. But why not? They like it. And it's a good song and I like doing it too. Exactly. So I've been through that journey as well.
Yeah.
I don't know why we have to do that to ourselves, but it seems to be a common thing with performers.
It's a real, false thing, isn't it? That I've just finished The Artist's Way for the second time, which
Me
is
too, 2 days ago.
Oh my gosh, me too.
Yes.
Amazing.
Okay. I'm looking for people to be in my sacred circle, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Have you read the last bit?
I have, and actually, we'll talk about this off the podcast because I've started a WhatsApp group, so we're going to talk about this. Yeah. Because
Awesome.
I'm doing it again. I'm going to start it again on Sunday.
Oh, no way.
I'm just going to go through it because we're in a position where I've got the time to do the tasks.
Yeah.
But for listeners, The Artist's Way is a 12-week course in a book. And it was written in 1992, so it's a little bit dated. It doesn't really refer to things like emails or social media and stuff, which is really interesting. So I find that you read a chapter a week, and in the chapters it'll be like stop reading newspapers and books and get out in the real world. And I'm like, I don't have that problem. But I'm gonna swap those for smartphone, and I'm pretty sure that still stands.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reading deprivation week. I think it's week 4. And I do read a lot of novels.
Yes.
So I had to stop reading, and I stopped reading anything online really, apart from essential, like emails essential. But I guess it can be. So I read just emails a little bit, and I really limited my online time and stuff. And it was really good because I found myself processing the things I had read beforehand. So I think I got more out of the novels I'd been reading in the preceding weeks because I had time to for my brain to process when I was asleep, when I was awake, whatever. It really was good. And it made me think that actually every few months I should have a week off reading.
Yeah.
It's kind of like composting or something.
Well, see, I don't read that much, but I listen to a ton of podcasts and I watch a lot of TV.
Yeah.
And so I just went completely off. I didn't do any podcasts. I didn't do any television. So I had my TV off for a week. And I no social media and stuff. It basically just no media.
Yeah.
And it's a bit scary. And I'm imagining you found the same thing as well. But for the first day or two, you feel so bored.
Yeah.
And then it's like you have this snap where it's like when you're a kid and you didn't know what to do, and your parents are like, oh, just go out, or like just draw a thing, or just write a story or whatever.
Mm.
And you're like, oh, yeah, I do. Like, you find your own way of entertaining yourself when you let yourself get bored enough.
Yeah.
And you'll be really creative in it as well. I find it really freeing. Hard, but freeing.
This is probably a good point to remind you of the fact that this podcast partly exists because of you. We did a gig together in December and I told you about that thing. So
Yes.
I just saw a tweet from you about how you have, what do you call it? Screen-free Sundays. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, no screen Sundays.
No screen Sundays. Very simple
Yeah.
concept, but also something I realised that I didn't do. I was thinking, why don't I even have one day off a week from all the stuff? So I decided to have the one day off. And during that day, I felt so good. I decided to just stop for ages. And I think I was off for about 8 weeks, something like that. Maybe it may have been 12.
Oh, wow.
Not looking at feeds. I did have to check messages and like, incoming stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Had a massive break and it was life-changing. It was really good. And then I started reading books by Cal Newport about digital minimalism. He's got a book called Deep Work, all of which led to this podcast being called Attention Engineer. That's why it's called that. And just massively helped me to improve my offline life, which sounds ridiculous because your life is your life, online and offline. But I definitely feel much more of a balanced person than I have done in years and years. So thank you for that little seed.
Oh, no, you're welcome.
Really ironically read in a tweet, but
Oh, it's so true, isn't it, as well? Most of my big sort of eye-opening bits have been like people's tweets. Yeah, so the reason that I mentioned the Artist's Way is because, and you'll know this now because you've just finished it as well, is that there's a wonderful bit in the sort of the epilogue where it says that there's this sort of fast that artists have to be in competition with each other, and there's only so much space. And when you see other artists doing well, then that means that you're they're taking that chance away from you because they've taken it, and I think a lot of us are led to believe that's the case, and it really brings up some unhealthy jealousy. I think there is such a thing as healthy jealousy, which is that sort of that one that's with love, where you're like, I'm really jealous for you, but it's almost like you're so happy for someone as well. But when you get that jealousy that is dirty and angry and sad and mean, I think that comes from us believing these lies about what it means to be a creative. There's a beautiful line which I really enjoyed, which was water seeks its own level and rises. It's something like and rises collectively. That's it. Water seeks its own level and rises collectively. That's exactly what we are, is that we need to support each other and raise each other up together as opposed to trying to compete.
Yeah, and the thing with competition is you don't even know what part of the journey that person's on. They could be on step 3022 of their journey and you're on step 10. So it's not healthy to compare yourself because of that reason. And then also there's little enough energy for everything, let alone spreading it across all this sort of nastiness. I read that chapter maybe 2 days ago, and I am guilty of definitely having moments, I think we all do, of going, well, why isn't my thing doing this thing and that person's thing's doing that thing and that's annoying. And I try not to indulge it, but of course I have to be honest, it does happen. And then I read that chapter and I just thought, oh, that's so good. I need to keep reading that because just letting that stuff go is so freeing. Frees you up to do what you're supposed to be doing and stop looking at everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And also it does do that thing where it's earlier in the book, it sort of encourages you to use those feelings of competition and jealousy to work out where your compass is.
Yeah.
Because the amount of times I found that I felt bitter or jealous about someone, it was because they were working really hard on something that deep down I wish I'd been working on.
Yeah.
Or that I was doing, and instead I was in a different place. And then I had to go okay, do I really want what they have? Or am I really happy with what I'm chasing? Because if I'm happy with what I'm chasing, I need to let go of that anger and jealousy I have for them because they're on a path that I don't want to be on anyway. Or they're on a path I want to be on. And then I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be doing the thing I'm doing. I should go and work on that more.
Yeah. Well, just that self-reflection, I think, is really important. That's what I've got so much from this year, from doing the Artist's Way and starting to meditate and stuff as well. Just to have that time to go, why am I doing these things? Why didn't I stick at this other thing? Or, what am I actually trying to do here? Because especially with launching this podcast and a new album and everything, it's a good time to sort of go, well, what am I trying to do? and being aware of it. Because I feel like, having done music for quite a long time, it's like with everything else in my life, I don't want to just do something because I'm already doing it and it's habit. I really hate that. So it's similar with the drinking, I guess, similar sort of idea.
Yeah, so true.
Do you feel like that? Have you always known that you're on the right path? Do you reassess that? How do you deal with that?
It's an ongoing thing,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. It's weird because for about the first 8 years, I was just trying to get to a place where I didn't have to have a day job and I could do comedy, and that was the aim.
Yeah.
Was to make enough money from comedy that I could pay rent and everything. And then I got to that point and I didn't realize, but I didn't rest, like, I wouldn't say rested on my laurels, but it took me a long time to realize that I hadn't replaced that dream with a new one.
Mm.
So I'd just sort of been plodding along, making enough to get by. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not so much about the money. It's just more that I hadn't really dreamt any bigger than that.
Yeah.
So when all my friends were like, in comedy, they were like, oh, I'd love to be on Live at the Apollo. And I was like, yeah, I guess. Like, I'm pretty happy where I am, you know. But I did start to get itchy again. And it's been a really long process trying to work out what paths I want to be on. Because I now do so many things that aren't just stand up. I have a lot of online stuff, and I write for a lot of kids TV at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to present on kids TV. That's something that I still want to do one day before I'm too old for them to cast me. Yeah, like I do a lot of stand up for kids as well. So I really enjoy doing that stuff, but it's been trying to sort of find a new dream to chase.
Yeah.
Which has been interesting because for so long, my dream was financially driven that I've forgotten what it's like to do something because I really, really want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that I have a habit of only chasing the things that are going to be profitable,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the things that I actually deep down want to do. So that's why this isolation thing's been really interesting, because I've had all my work cancelled or moved, and I should be really scared. But instead, I've really enjoyed the freedom of trying to try a bunch of new things just for the sake of doing them, because if it feels like a good use of time and energy to try something different. Like, I joined TikTok, and I'm not convinced by it, but I've made like 3 or 4 quick, 15-second, but made these little sketch things. And I haven't done that for the sake of doing it for ages.
Mm.
You know, for a long time, any content I put out was stuff that either matched up with something I'd been commissioned to make, or something that I wanted to put in a big show that I was going to, sell tickets to.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it for that reason. I didn't do it because I was like, oh, I've got an idea for a thing and I reckon I can execute that in about an hour.
Well, it's good to hear that that's inspiring you, that this awful bad thing can be good for creativity, because that's what we do. So that's good. I mean, I wrote a song this week and I feel good about it. I wish I hadn't had to write a song about this, but it's happening. So what am I going to do? Not write the song?
Well, that's it. We're making lemonade is what we're doing. We weren't looking for the lemons to start with. And I don't like the fact that lemons have been terrible for other people.
No,
but,
of course not.
Sometimes just to get through, going to make that sweet, sweet lemonade.
Exactly. We've talked a little bit about the internet and smartphones and things. What's your current relationship to those things?
I'm fully addicted.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
Really bad. That's why I started trying to practice the no screen Sundays more often, because I'm trying to wean myself off. And like, it is that sort of thing where you enjoy it, and so you find you don't check it as often. But what I found, and what anyone else will probably find, is that if you try and stay off of your phone for a day, so I'll put it on flight mode, the amount of times you'll finish something and you'll just instantly go and reach for it. And I've got IBS, so I spend a lot of my time in the toilet. And smartphones are great because I can sit there and, scroll through Twitter or check emails or whatever while I'm on the loo. And when I am actively trying to stay off my phone for the day, I'll really need to go to the toilet. And I'll go into my bedroom to get my phone. And then I'm like, oh, that's not a habit that I want to continue. So I'm getting better at just being more comfortable being apart from my phone and not having it there as a security blanket,
Yeah.
which is hard. In the past, before smartphones, I hated being on my own, and I used to always surround myself with other people. I was very rarely happy in my own company. And then in order to become more independent, I started relying more on my smartphone to make me feel less lonely in those situations. And that worked in a sense that meant that I started saying yes to a lot more gigs in places that I hadn't been before, or situations where I'd be around people I didn't know. In the past, I would say no if I couldn't take a friend or a partner or someone with me. And then once smartphones became a thing, I was like, oh, yeah, I've got my smartphone. So if I'm in trouble, I can call someone. If I'm bored, I can check stuff. I'm always within reach of people I know, so I don't feel scared or alone. And that's kind of good because it freed me up to do a lot of things I wouldn't do in the past. But then all that had happened is I'd become, instead of being dependent on another physical person, I became dependent on the connection that technology allows me.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's weird trying to wean yourself off of it and truly be independent and truly be comfortable in your own presence without anything else around.
Yeah.
It's not nice. I don't like it.
No.
But at first, I think after time, then you start to really enjoy it and appreciate it. But I reckon for about the first half hour, I feel really gross. I don't like being on my own.
That's so interesting because I've been trying to wean myself off as well, and it's up and down. The addiction is there all the time, as strongly as it ever was, I think. Even if I've put my phone in the cupboard, which I do, or I've turned it off to flight mode, or I turn it off for a day or whatever it is, if I allow myself to then pick it up, I will just be like bam, 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 scroll, round and round and round and round. It's not like it's lessened. Like I'll do it a bit and put it down again. It's just always there, seemingly, like waiting to pounce on me. But what I have been doing is reading about the science of the dopamine addiction and the way your dopamine receptor gets too flooded, and that's why you kind of feel shitty if you're on it too much, and the fact that having text conversations with friends doesn't fire the brain in the same way that having a conversation on the phone or in person would. So you actually you're not feeling like you're being more sociable, even though you kind of technically are. So that's been very interesting to me. And also just the idea that I'm filling my head with the thoughts of other people at all times instead of having my own thoughts. So I try to keep that in my mind because that's really important to me, especially as, with what I do, writing songs and stuff. It needs to come from me, really. So, but it's an ongoing struggle for a lot of people. It's neither completely bad or completely good, is it? It's just one of those things. And especially now, to have these connections now, I definitely am seeking comfort in it now because we're so isolated from each other.
Yeah, although I did find, I don't know about you, I found that when it kicked off, I had so many FaceTimes and like phone calls with people that I was so tired. I was like, my workload during the day, like obviously my evening workload left, but my workload during the day hadn't lessened. In fact, it grew because suddenly I then had to change all of my gig listings and speak to venues and so my admin actually grew. I had far more work to do during the day than I did normally. And then on top of that, all of my friends, and a lot of whom don't work from home, who had suddenly been sent home and either didn't have work to do or had less work to do, they were suddenly messaging and calling and they were like, are you all right? Are you all right? And I was like, actually, like right now I'm fine because nothing much has changed for me daytime wise. It's evenings that are tough. But by the time I get to the evening, I'm so tired. I don't want to talk to anyone. But Joz, I've actually mentioned this on a few things already, but Joz Norris, who's a fantastic comedian, tweeted not long after everything went into lockdown. And he said, so I'm paraphrasing, but he said, as an introvert, he's done more socializing in the last few days than he ever does. He said phone call after FaceTime, after group chat, after everything. And then he said, quarantine is exhausting. It's like, this is the most socially exhausting thing I've ever had to do. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I felt really wrung out and really stressed. And I had to get to a point where I started to just say to people, if you need to talk, I'm here. But if you're calling me or messaging me to see how I am, I actually really need to not talk to anyone for a bit because I felt wrung out. Yeah.
This is just a little pause to thank my beloved Correspondence Club for powering everything I do. These fantastic people signed up to my members club in exchange for lots of fun perks, like the online gig I mentioned earlier, weekly emails, t-shirts, enamel badges, zines, and access to my super friendly online forum. New members get 2 free songs immediately, and there are free and affordable paid options available, so do go and have a browse at penfriend.rocks. I have another treat for you today, along with the lovely news that Attention Engineer is freshly affiliated with Skillshare. I'd been eyeing up several courses on Skillshare for a while last year, but it wasn't until lockdown happened that I finally used up a code I'd been saving and got 2 months of free classes. So far, I've completed Roxane Gay's personal essay class, which was totally brilliant, and I'm halfway through Ali Abdaal's Final Cut Pro X editing class too, having recently moved back over from Premiere Pro. The weekend before last, I did a 3-point lighting course, which came in handy for my online gig, and I have a list of other classes I hope to get round to very soon. If you're interested in learning something new, you can now use my code for 2 months of free classes and help keep this series going to boot. Win-win. Just go to penfriend.rocks/Skillshare for more info and links. Hooray! Now, back to my conversation with Bec. I was reading on Wikipedia about you as prep for this, and I read that her one-liners have featured in best joke lists for media outlets such as The Telegraph, Dave, The Guardian, The Independent, The Daily Record and BuzzFeed. She has also appeared in a worst joke list. So I was wondering, which of those are you most proud of?
Oh,
And was it the same joke?
definitely best. No, the worst one the worst one hasn't aged well because I've grown as a human.
Okay.
The worst thing about the worst one is that it was one of those throwaway lines that's really lazy. And I don't think it reflects me or how I feel these days. And it was really, all it was is I had a joke about soy milk and then I said, I'm really sorry if you're vegan. In fact, most of my friends are vegan. They were going to come to the show today, but they didn't have the energy to get up the stairs. It's such a lazy gag.
Yeah, okay.
And so now in hindsight, I'm like 100% that belonged in worst jokes. It wasn't even like good bad. It was just hack. And so I'm not proud of that one. The one that got into the best jokes actually won the best, the nation's favorite toilet joke. And I am most proud of that one. And that one was, I got given Sudoku toilet paper. It's really awful. You can only fill it in with number 1s and number 2s. And
very good.
The irony of that is that it started out as half a not joke. I actually got given Sudoku toilet paper. And so it was like a gag I made when I got given it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that works as a joke. And then it got picked up during Fringe for who knows what reason. I've got better bad jokes than that. But in terms of the ones that have actually gained people's attention, I'm pretty happy with that. I actually got a golden toilet seat for that as well, which is by my feet in this cupboard, but behind my flip chart, so I can't show you.
Very cool.
It's great. It's really sparkly. Yeah.
It strikes me as being kind of cruel that there are worst joke lists, because you don't have worst band lists, do you? Or maybe there are worst band lists and I didn't even get on that one. I don't know. I don't know. It just seems really mean.
I don't know if they still do the worst joke ones.
Okay.
I think it was just 1 year or for a couple of years. I'm not sure if they still do them.
What is success to you?
Oh, such a good question. I think I wrote that down recently. I was trying to work it out. I think success to me is both feeling fulfilled and I mean fulfilled in a holistic sense, in a sort of that you feel fulfilled creatively, with your career, with your relationships, your friendships and things like that. But having enough slight uncomfortableness like the pee under all the mattresses. Just having that little bit that keeps you going, oh, I reckon I could get a little bit more. Like just enough to give you more of an effort to keep moving forward rather than just staying still. I think that's success. Yeah.
Have you ever felt that you've had that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, or at least I feel like I've nearly had it. And that's pretty good too, actually. That's a pretty good place to be. Because when you're like feeling 98% successful, then, there's just a bigger P that you're trying to sort out under those mattresses. And again, it gets you moving forward. There's a comic called David Morgan and presenter. And he told me that every year on the same day, I can't remember if it was like the day after his birthday or the day before his birthday or something, he writes out where he feels he is in terms of his he does it for his career. I reckon you could do it for other things as well, but he writes out like his accomplishments or whatever and where he feels that he is. And then the next year he writes it out and he gauges whether he's moving forward or if he's stayed stagnant or if he's gone backwards. And you can slip backwards every now and then or stay stagnant. But when you slip backwards, you get a cross. And if you get three, you get a strike. And if you get 3 strikes in a row, then something needs to change.
Yeah.
And it means that you're not on the right path. And I think that's a really interesting take on it. I've not done it that way before because I know that I think mentally I do that, but I've not actually physically written them down. But I definitely know there's been a few years where I've felt stagnant or taken a step back. But fortunately, I think the last couple of years now, I feel like I'm in a place where I'm sort of moving forward. Even if they're teeny tiny baby steps, I feel like I'm pushing towards something. I don't know what the something is, but it's nice.
It's a nice feeling. I like the way you talk about success because I think we feel similarly about it in that it's something that you don't reach it and then it's done, because that doesn't make sense, does it? If you had a goal and then you got the goal and then you have nothing to do for the rest of your life, that would be a sad situation. All you would then do is look back on, oh, I did that thing years ago, but then I stopped. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I don't think you can be successful and not doing anything.
Yeah.
Because like, as you say, you achieve success, but you have to continually have it to be seen as successful. You can't achieve it and then you've done it. And then it, like, for the rest of your life, you don't get called successful because you did something 10 years ago and then stopped.
Yeah, exactly.
You only get to say you're successful if you're still doing something. And whether that's I don't know, it could be fame or fortune, or it could be raising a family, or it could be you volunteer at a shelter every Sunday and that's the thing that you do, and as long as you keep doing it you feel good and successful. That might be it. Or
yeah, totally. I'm weird in many ways, but one of the things that makes me weird is that whenever I hear about like an artist, especially in music, having this massive achievement, like they won this thing or they got this giant hit single, I actually feel quite sorry for them now, because if they don't get that thing again, it's going to feel like a failure, where actually there's so much more to life than just that one thing. And like you say, it's for me, it's like this moving target almost, where you feel like you're living the life that you want, whether that's a creative life in making things, or you feel creative in your day-to-day life for other ways, like volunteering or raising a family, and all of those myriad things you could be doing. Yeah, and I just feel bad when people have too much success, because I feel like it must be very hard for them if then they don't get that again. You talked earlier about having, would you call it anxiety about being alone and going out and saying yes to gigs and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have anxiety about leaving the flat. And it's really weird because I've always thought of myself, and I think come across as a bit of an extrovert, especially as a comedian. Obviously, a lot of people see you as an extrovert. But I really don't like leaving my flat. Which again is why I think I'm coping so well mentally at the moment. I just assumed that everyone hated leaving their home until I realized how poorly some people are managing not being able to leave the house. But I get really anxious and I'm late to a lot of things. And part of that is because I'm constantly worried either that something's going to happen while I'm away from the flat. Like I'm always worried about takes me ages to leave because I don't know if I've turned off things or if I've got everything that I need or if I've got keys and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know where it stems from either, but I guess there's like an element of when you're in home, you can control that, and it's very, you might not have amazing experiences at home, but you also probably won't have really horrible ones either. And so I think there's part of my survivalist brain that's like, oh, well, home is neutral, which is better than having awful things happen to you if you leave home. I did find it got worse when I moved to London, and I think that's partly because I find London very, very stressful, and I don't find it very pretty, which is quite mean to say because I know a lot of people love London so much. I just don't. I don't find it a pretty city. I find it cold and in most cases very unloving as an entire place. And I think leaving my flat reminds me of where I am and that I'm not happy where I am physically. But yeah, so there's a weird anxiety around that. I'd be interested to see if it was the same if I lived somewhere where I was very excited by being there. I used to live in Melbourne when I left home originally from Adelaide, and Melbourne is just such a beautiful city, and I love it's very exciting, and it when I'm in Melbourne, it's like when you see someone you used to have a massive crush on. I genuinely feel a bit in love every time I'm there, and I never had that with London.
Yeah.
I feel like I settled for London.
Oh, wow. Have you thought of going back to Melbourne then?
I would love to. I would love to go back to Melbourne, but I also feel like I have got too many things happening here that I need to finish before I go back. And actually, interestingly, since I got back, so I went back to Australia earlier this year to see family and do some shows and everything. And when I got back here, I had a bit of a sad spell, and then that also mixed in with when I had the flu. So I got really, really depressed. And then when I started to get better, and with the help of doing the Artist Way course, I'd started to make a bunch of changes. So as soon as I got back from Australia, I went through my wardrobe and got rid of anything that I haven't worn in ages or I'm unlikely to wear. I went through all the cupboards and got rid of things that I've been holding on to for no reason. I just sort of slowly started sorting through everything. And then I got a new filing cabinet, a new second-hand, basically at my husband's work, someone was getting rid of a filing cabinet and an office chair, which is like, mwah, like a lush office chair, like one of those lovely orthopedic type ones. Oh, it's so nice.
Yeah.
And I'd been sitting in this awful broken chair for so many years and getting really bad back pain. And so we went and we picked up the new filing cabinet and the office chair. And I was so excited by them. And then I was like, oh, I can't stop here. I have to do everything in my little nook because I work in the kitchen because it's the only place with space. And so the kitchen sort of doubles up as my office. And so I bought, for days and days and days, I was looking up these cabinet/desks. And then when I had the flu, I found this upcycled drinks cabinet for really cheap on Etsy, from some secondhand furniture store up in Glasgow. And I got it delivered just before everything went into lockdown and stuff. And so like my first day of lockdown was me clearing out and cleaning up the desk and setting it up and then putting all my things in there. Oh, it's so good because it's like an old drinks cabinet. So it has a little fold down desk bit, which I use for when I'm like typing and doing admin and stuff. But it's got these two side cabinets where I guess you would normally stack bottles and everything. But they're perfect for all of my craft things and my little props, like little things I use in my flip charts, like just tubes and party poppers and things with bubbles and stuff. And so I've got everything in there. And then above the desk bit, there's a glass, like a glass cabinet. So I put all my I've got toys and action figures and like little things that I've collected over the years. So I put them in there on display. So when I sit down and I look up from doing admin, I'm just looking at like little troll dolls and soft toys and things from my
Yay.
childhood. And that's so nice. It makes me so happy. And then in the little bit where you fold down the desk at the back, there's a little stationery nook. So it's got all my Post-its and stickers and paper and stuff in there. But I've put like one of the little shelves is so small and I've got all these tiny treasures. So I've got like a teeny tiny troll from when I was like 6 or something, and I've got some little opals, like rough opals that I got when I was on a holiday when I was about 10, and then like a D&D 12-sided die that a friend had given me, and my old baby teeth in a little vial that I found when I was back in Australia. Like just weird little things. And then I put those wired party lights around it. So that if I'm extra sad and I need to really boost myself, I turn them on and it's like a little rainbow party lights around all my little treasures. And it just feels so magical. It feels like when you're a kid and you have like a little corner with all your toys and whether it's a doll's house or a train set or Lego or whatever. And it's so nice. It's so nice. And I was actually saying to my husband, since I got the cabinet and put everything in there and I've made my workspace a lot more enjoyable, I've actually been so much happier being in London, and I haven't wanted to leave or move or anything. So I think a lot of it is just feeling like I'm in control of my workspace and that I have a little place for me.
I think this stuff is so important, and it's only recently that I've embraced all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
Have you ever read any of Austin Kleon's books?
No.
He's got 3. I'll send you the link. He's got these books. There's one called Steal Like an Artist, Show Your Work and Keep Going. Small, brilliant books. And in one of them, I can't remember which one it is, but he talks about the importance of having like a beautiful little nook of your own, whether that's the tiniest piece of table with something on the wall, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but just to indulge that thing. You need to feel inspired to do the thing you want to do in your surroundings. And there's nothing wrong with getting fairy lights and putting your baby teeth and anything that might seem silly, but that you want to do. Just do it. Why not? My whole room is like that. This room that I'm sitting in right now is full of what other people might think is kind of like silly garbage, but I don't care because it makes me feel happy to be in here.
No, it's amazing. I can see it in the shot and it's like a church to fun and ideas and creativity, and I'm loving it.
Yes, it's great. I'm so glad you have one too. I think everyone would really appreciate having a little tour of that.
Yes.
If it's something you want to share. But it might be your private secret thing, which is also fine.
It's actually perfect because I talked about this. I do a podcast with Matt Parker, who I believe you've crossed paths with before as well.
Yes.
We do a podcast called A Problem Squared. I use my brilliant social skills and he uses his math skills to solve people's problems. And we have an Instagram account, which is at A Problem Squared. And I actually gave a little tour of my cabinet and where I'm recording now and where I'm recording under the stairs.
Brilliant.
So yeah, if anyone wants to see the cabinet that I described, then go to at A Problem Squared on Instagram and there's a little tour of it.
Brilliant. I'm very excited about that. I think this stuff is so important, and you know, we've both just been through The Artist's Way, and Julia Cameron very wisely talks about your artist, your inner artist is a child.
Mm-hmm.
And she even says to pick out like a toy from your childhood or some sort of emblem of it, like to have as a mascot. So I've picked out the bear. I'm pointing, but no one can hear me point. The bear that was in the hospital bed with me when I was a little baby, when I was just born, and it's been with me my whole life. I don't even know its name. That's terrible, isn't it? How do I not know the name of that bear? Maybe it never had a name. I'm confused.
Could you not name it?
I'm going to check with my parents to see if there's a name that exists. Otherwise, it's just bear. It's not very interesting. It's not very artistic.
I like bear.
So I'm very excited to see that tour. Thank you for sharing that with us. And the reason I was asking about anxiety actually was just because I think music and comedy is quite similar, but I love to learn about everyone's different ways of dealing with things. I was just wondering how you balance the highs and the lows of that kind of lifestyle. How do you look after yourself day to day to keep things okay?
I think I've only recently started taking that seriously, because I find it very easy to let myself slip into bad habits, whether that's just spending days scrolling on it, social media, or binge watching stuff on TV, or drinking, or doing any number of things that aren't very good for you mental health wise. All good in moderation. just not the whole day's worth. And I do think, at the risk of sounding like I'm an evangelist, I think the morning pages has been really useful, which again, for listeners, it comes from the Artist Way. And the idea is that you do 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing every morning. And it sucks sometimes.
Yeah.
And it can be a really hard habit to keep up, but it is incredibly liberating, and it does really help you work out what is bothering you, if anything. And sometimes you'll just spend days just, complaining on there. But when you spend days just complaining about how tired and grumpy you feel, you'll sometimes find that actually makes you an easier person to be around for the rest of the day, because you've already vented somewhere. So just little things like that, it's very useful. Me personally, I there's a church that I really like in Holloway called St. Luke's.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's a really good. It's where Reverend Dave Tomlinson used to. He's had to retire because apparently I don't know much about the Church of England, and I didn't before I moved here. But in the Church of England, when you turn 75, you have to retire.
Okay.
So when he turned 75, he was made to retire. Much to the sadness of his congregation. But they finally found a new reverend, and he seems really cool. I really like him. And I haven't got to know him personally, but I've really enjoyed his sermons, and he seems to sort of fit in well. It's a very, very progressive congregation. So they're very proactive in terms of LGBTQI rights, and they were huge support and continue to be huge supporters of Extinction Rebellion, and they turned into a shelter over the winter to take in people. Although I'm not sure if they're doing that right now, because obviously the rules in place. But it's a really nice church filled with really interesting and nice people, and they're very, very honest about it's almost like some of them I don't even know if I would call them Christian. I think they're there for the community aspect and for the self-reflection that comes with the action of being in a church, and the routine. But it's really nice that even the ones who you would maybe classify as religious are all quite honest about, like Reverend Dave, when he wrote a book called How to Be a Bad Christian and a Better Human Being. And I mean, the title says everything. It's a fantastic book. It's a great nonfiction book, which I thoroughly recommend. And it was essentially very honest about the fact that no one can for sure say what the deal is or what's happening. We can only just try and be the best people we can be. And like he himself didn't believe in hell. So he talked about that a lot in his sermons. He's like, well, I don't think hell's real, and these are my reasons. And it's hard to find churches where they would probably preach that. So I'm getting off topic here though. But what I meant to say is that that, like the morning pages, is something where it's very easy for me to wake up on a Sunday morning and be like, ugh, I don't want to go in. But every time I do it, I feel so much better for it. And I think it's just sitting in a place where they have a wonderful choir. They sound like angels. And I love sitting there and listening to them. And then the sermons are, I came to Christianity quite, like, I was in my teens, but then I've sort of wrestled with it as well. I wasn't born in a religious family. So for me, like a good sermon, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like a TED Talk, which of course, like sermons were around way before TED Talks, but that's how I see it. And I just find them really, really more often useful than not. And even when they're not, it's a nice time to just be there and have a little think and be alone and not looking at your phone for a bit as well. So that's been really great for my anxiety and for my mental health. I think annoyingly for everyone, usually the thing that helps you with whatever issues you're having is the thing that you sometimes experience huge resistance to. And
Yeah.
it's the thing where you'll do it and then you're like, why didn't I do this more often? And then
Running.
sure enough, the next time it comes around, you're like, well, I've already done it. Why do I have to do it again? And then you'll do it and you're like, oh, I feel so much better now. It's hard. I can't say it's not. I wish I could say, these simple rules and you do that and you're fine. But it's always, even the little things are hard sometimes. Even just
Yeah.
getting out of bed can be really hard sometimes. So I
Yeah.
guess just taking every day as it comes, baby steps, not judging yourself too harshly, but also remembering what it's like to not feel happy and use that as a push that you need to do the things that you know make you better.
Yeah. That's a lovely way of putting it. I think it would be exhausting to be happy all the time. That's why I try to remind myself as someone who's very often not very happy. Like I try and remember that.
Yeah, that's why dogs don't live as long as people.
Because they're so happy.
Yeah, they use it all up too quickly.
Aw. Well, both of my dogs are sitting on the chair judging you right now. Happily judging you.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend recently about this kind of stuff, and we were listing the things that we knew that if we stopped doing them, within about 3 days, we'd be super depressed and wouldn't be able to get out of bed. And my ones were taking vitamin D every day, which I do.
Yep.
Doing exercise of any kind. So I do yoga, Pilates and running, but not like all the time, but I should. Drinking water.
Yeah.
It's like real basic stuff. And this is obviously, I'm talking about non-medical depression here. I'm talking about black moods, doldrums, rather than, I'm not talking about the kinds of things where you need medication. So I'm not trivializing that. But certainly for anyone who's a sensitive, autistic person, I think for anyone, there's certainly basic things we can do to get ourselves onto a certain level. And then you may also need medication on top of that, of course, or, therapy of some kind. But for me, I'm lucky enough that if I do all of those things, then I'm pretty much okay.
Yep.
Might not be deliriously happy, but I'm pretty much okay. So that's quite an interesting way of doing it, of going, well, what things, if I stop doing them, would I fall apart within 3 days? And then just try and make sure you do those as much as you can.
Yeah.
Because, it's kind of like your medicine in a way. And so for me, it is like running, water, some kind of self-reflection. So the morning pages, again, have really helped me. Just got to keep going. Got to keep trucking along as best we can.
That's right.
Who are your current favourite artists? And this could be comedians, it could be music, it could be anything. Wide open.
I'll tell you who I discovered recently, because I always find it hard to say favourite because so often that changes depending on who I am at the time and how I feel. But most recently, we were sent a link from a friend to a live show recording of an Australian comedian called Sam Campbell, who I'd somehow missed because when I looked him up, he's done Soho Theatre and he's got a blap and, the Channel 4 stuff. And it's not, he's got stuff going on for him, but he's not really on social media. And I think I tend to miss people who don't work in the same circles as me. And he's really strange and funny and silly and very, very creative, but in a really aggressive Australian way. And I think there's part of me that loves it because there's a silliness there that I really only connect with. There's a certain strain of Australian humor that is very hard to replicate in other countries. And it's really nice to see him performing it because I think it's a type that I miss. And it's really silly. So his show's called Trough, Trough, and it's on YouTube. And it was recorded somewhere in Los Angeles. But his blap is fantastic as well. I loved it. It's only 7 minutes long or whatever. But if you just look up Sam Campbell on YouTube, I think his Channel 4 blap comes up pretty quickly. And it's exactly what I needed. And one of the things I'd written on my to-do list was watch someone who I've never seen before. And I've already done it by accident because someone just sent a YouTube link. But yeah, so I really enjoyed him. I really like Joz Norris as well. His mind just works in a way that I can't comprehend, and I find that really enjoyable. Same with Spencer Jones. His stuff is great. I think I'm really drawn to people who do stuff that is sort of along the lines of what I do in terms of it's not really heavily topical or dealing with anything current. It's more just an exploration of the silly side of things and a general wonder or intrigue about how things work and the way the world is, as opposed to an opinion on that. And so I'm drawn to that, but at the same time, they all deal with it in a different way to how I do. And that's really refreshing and nice. In the same way that I think anyone who sees Josie Long for the first time feels, that real, like, I think she's always going to be there in my up there with my favorites. Sarah Kendall's fantastic storyteller. Obviously, I'm naming all comedians, but I think that's because I pretty much, when we're not in lockdown, I pretty much only see comedy because that's where I am in the evenings as well. So I'd love to name a bunch of authors and musicians, but other than yourself, I don't really think I see. And even then, it's usually because you're at the Stay Home Festival.
Yeah.
It's something that's online. Yeah, I'm just not cultured enough. That's what I'm trying to change. Maybe in a few years' time, we'll do a follow-up podcast and I'll be like, oh, yeah, I'm really into this performance artist who goes to ponds on Saturday and face paints fish.
That sounds like your next show now.
Yeah, as I said, I was like, this is a great idea.
Comedy gold. Well, thank you for that, because I have such a massive appreciation for comedy. That's why I was so excited to get you on this. And I'm going to be talking to some other comedians as well. Because for me, I feel like I'm more inspired by those kinds of things than I am by other bands, if that doesn't sound pretentious. And even if it does, because it's just true. Because there's something so powerful about the limitations of the format. I mean, quite often it's very much one person and a microphone, and you bring all of your awesome props in as well, but it's just the inner workings of someone's mind displayed with no shame, no embarrassment, or if there is, it's part of the act. I find that absolutely fascinating, and it's something that's just transfixed me over the years. I'm really looking forward to checking out all those other comedians, because it's not my world, and so I always really want to have some recommendations. So thank you. That's great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And then finally, I'd love to know which pieces of your own work that we could go and check out online, perhaps, you would like to recommend to listeners, because I want them to get to know your amazing world.
So I think the cheapest and easiest thing to do is head on over to youtube.com/Bec Hill Comedian or Be Chill Comedian, depending on how you read it. And I've got a bunch of short videos there of the flip charts that we talked about in this recording. If you watch that and you're like, I want to see more, then the second thing I recommend is going on over to Next Up Comedy. That's nextupcomedy.com/I love Bec. Now, I didn't come up with that URL, Next Up did. But if you go nextupcomedy.com/I love Bec, then you can get a free trial of their streaming service. And I've got 2 shows on there. The first one is a really good introduction if you sort of want to get an introduction of what I do. And it's called Bec in 1 Hour. And then the second show on there is a show I did last year at Fringe, which is called I'll Be Bec. And it is the furthest away from any type of normal comedy that I do.
Brilliant.
So, that's for anyone who wants to see that. And I think my third recommendation is probably just to find me on Twitter, which is just @Bec Hill Comedian. And, I've got lots of dumb jokes on there. Retweet me, say hi.
Awesome.
Got some good poo jokes.
Fantastic. Not just the one. Very good.
Yeah, 2.
Actually, we haven't talked about your podcast yet either. So not only do you do comedy, but you do many podcasts, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like you do lots.
Too many. If you're a comedian, you've got a podcast. That's the way the deal goes. Well, as soon as you give up your day job, you have to sign a thing that says that you're going to host a podcast. I do 3 podcasts. One's with Matt Parker, which we mentioned earlier, and that's called A Problem Squared. And then I do 2 other podcasts. I do a podcast with the wonderful Professor Lucy Rogers and another brilliant comedian called Harriet Brain. And we talk about tech and everything around it. So we sort of go into the history of things that are happening in tech and then what's moving forward with it. So in the next season we're about to record, we talk about quantum computing and food technology and space tourism. So if you're so inclined to find out more about that, that's called the Design Spark podcast. They're our sponsors. And the third podcast that I'm about to release is with another Matt. It's another comedian called Matt Heighton. And we're about to release a podcast called Con Sessions. And Matt Heighton and I co-host Brussels Comic Con every year, and we recorded all of the interviews that we did with all of the celebrities. So we had Kari Payton and Seth Gilliam from The Walking Dead. We had Christina Ricci. We had Katie Leung from Harry Potter. So we had some really, really cool people on there. And we're going to release those interviews so people can listen to what those people have to say about what goes on in the shows that or films that they do and what they're looking to do in the future.
Fantastic.
So that'll be Concessions, yeah.
Awesome.
That's CONSESSIONS.
Brilliant. That's loads of stuff to listen to. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Now, finally, Bec Hill comedian. Sorry, my dog's shaking. I'll ask that again. Shush. Be quiet, little one.
Aww.
Finally, Bec, what's your next adventure?
So the next adventure is probably going to be a belated tour, which won't be the one that is currently being advertised on my website. It'll be later in the year. So I think at this stage, the best thing people can do is follow me on social media, and I will announce adventures as they come out, because I think there's a lot of things up in the air at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know what the next big venture is going to be, but I'm feeling pretty positive about it.
I'm so glad. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. How great was that? My plan originally was to spend a few days in London recording conversations, and Bex was going to be one of those, but obviously everything got cancelled, so I'm really sad we didn't get to meet up in person, but it was a great chat anyway. Massive thanks to Bec for recording her side of it so beautifully from her very jazzy recording cupboard. Yes, evidence of this jazzy cupboard is online now. As always, I've gathered links to everything we talked about on a special page on my website, and Bec has shared a wonderful quote from The Artist's Way in a special note too. So head to penfriend.rocks/Bec, that's BEC, to continue your journey of discovery. And if you're intrigued by all this Correspondence Club chat, you can find a link to that as well. If you're enjoying this show, please subscribe, rate and review it. It's a totally independent endeavour, and I really appreciate your help in sharing it. Yes, I made all the music too, and yes, it's going to be on the debut Penfriend album coming soon. In the meantime, you can grab the first single and that limited release live album at penfriendrocks.bandcamp.com. Next week, I'll be introducing you to the work of Katie Harkin, solo artist and guitarist to the stars. Do not miss. Lots of love. Cheerio!